Today on Ag News Daily.
If safety is a value, that means, no matter what we're fixing, we have to think of safety first. And we think of, hey, what do I have to do to make sure I don't get hurt while I'm doing this task? And so I think that's really important.
Welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. Michelle Spangler here, joined by our summer intern, Josie Kelly. Delaney is out on the road talking to some entrepreneurs and tanners, having a hectic spring and summer. So it's just us two here today, Josie.
Yep, glad to be here.
Yeah, can't believe it's June Dairy Month into then July Ice Cream Month. So however you're celebrating, I hope it's a fun one. But certainly the weather is definitely a topic. You said you had some bad weather this morning.
Yeah, pretty rainy, pretty stormy. I had to go down to the basement this morning.
Well, here in Wisconsin, certainly a lot of rain. We are recording this a day earlier, but rain will continue here into the weekend. Here in the Midwest, bringing multiple showers and thunderstorms throughout the region. Some areas could see heavy rainfall and localized flooding, while others receive more moderate amounts of moisture. Severe weather will also be possible with some of the stronger storms. Overall, the pattern should provide beneficial rainfall for developing corn and soybean crops while helping maintain soil moisture across much of the Corn Belt. Temperatures are expected to cool by the weekend and remain below normal into next week, reducing crop stress even as the milder conditions may slightly slow growth. Looking ahead here, forecasters are watching the Pacific as AccuWeather says El Nino conditions have likely developed. A topic we talked with Eric Snodgrass a few weeks ago here on the podcast, with sea surface temperatures now above the key threshold. If it strengthens, the pattern could influence global weather and bring shifts in rainfall and temperatures across major U.S. growing regions, including the Midwest, over the next growing seasons. El Nino may also reduce Atlantic hurricane activity, with 11 to 16 named storms currently forecast this season. But certainly there's a lot of corn and soybeans here in the ground, even amidst this rainy weather.
Moving on to the USDA's latest crop progress report released Monday showed planting remains largely on track across the country. Corn planting reached 97% complete, slightly ahead of the 5-year average of 96%, while corn emergence reached 86%. Soybean planting also moved ahead of normal as 90% complete compared to the 5-year average of 89%, with 71% of the crop emerged. Crop conditions remain generally favorable as 67% of the nation's corn crop is rated good to excellent, unchanged from the previous week. Soybeans also held steady with 65% rated good to excellent. Recent rainfall has helped maintain soil moisture across much of the Corn Belt, supporting crop development as producers continue monitoring emergence and early season growth. We'll be back with more news after this week's tip with Corteva Agriscience.
Side dress applications have grown in popularity over the years as people try to spread out that risk of putting their nitrogen out there. So they might do something in the fall, and then they might put on some with the planter, and now they're going to put on some more here at side dress time. Managing that nitrogen is really important because it is a costly input for growers, and it's also hard to manage nitrogen. It moves, it wants to get away from us. And so putting that nitrogen out there and keeping it in that ammonium form for as long as we can is important. And using products like N-Serve or Instinct can help manage that and keep that nitrogen in the root zone where it belongs, where the corn plant can access it. And that's where we're going to see our greatest return on investment. And so that's what I would recommend to people to do is take a look at those products to help manage that nitrogen. And if they'd like to learn more about those products, they can go to nitrogenstabilizers.com and find a lot of information there to help guide them in that decision.
Looking into some crop news, agronomists are reminding soybean growers to pay close attention to herbicide application timing as crops move rapidly through early growth stages. Experts say one of the biggest threats to soybean yield potential this season could be post-emergence herbicide applications made after plants begin flowering. Weather delays, including rain and wind, have narrowed spray windows across parts of the Corn Belt, increasing the risk of those late applications. Researchers, which will often hear that word on today's episode, say soybean flower often begins around the summer solstice. around the summer start time through some early planted fields may reach that stage sooner. When soybeans enter reproductive growth stages, herbicide options become more limited and the potential for crop stress increases. Agronomists are encouraging producers to review product labels carefully and to prioritize weed control before flowering begins whenever possible. I know a lot of agronomy companies are having their research and field days this summer, so we'll continue to watch those here on Ag News Daily.
Transitioning into some livestock news, the USDA confirmed 3 additional cases of New World Screwworm on Monday, bringing the total number of known cases to 5. The new detections include a calf in South Texas, a goat west of Austin, and a dog in New Mexico, marking the first confirmed case outside of Texas. Officials have established quarantine zones around affected areas as monitoring and response efforts continue. The latest cases highlight the ongoing challenge of containing the parasite as officials work to track new detections. USDA and state animal health agencies are continuing surveillance efforts and expanding response measures, while producers are being encouraged to closely monitor livestock for signs of infestation and report any suspected cases.
Continuing on the New World Screwworm front, in a statement released on June 4th, the Meat Institute reassured consumers that meat and poultry products remain safe to eat following this confirmation of New World Screwworm case in Texas. The organization emphasized that the pest is not a food safety concern, while encouraging livestock producers, processors, and animal health officials to work together to detect and eradicate any potential spread. The group also highlighted ongoing USDA efforts to strengthen biosecurity and coordinate response measures. Certainly seen quite a few stories on that this week of what does that sterile fly facility look like and what are they doing to help support producers. Industry leaders are encouraging regulators to consider low-risk livestock movements for slaughter while following established response protocols.
Despite ongoing trade challenges, industry leaders expressed optimism about the pork sector during the recent World Pork Expo in Des Moines. Aaron Brower with the U.S. Meat Export Federation says strong export demand, particularly from Latin America, helped support a positive outlook among producers and industry representatives attending the event. Brower also highlighted ongoing trade restrictions on certain pork byproducts following recent detections of pseudorabies antibodies in pigs from Texas and Iowa. The U.S. Meat Export Federation says it is working with the USDA officials to encourage trading partners, including Mexico, to limit restrictions to affected areas while normal trade discussions continue.
Well, something that's top of mind for a lot of growers and ag groups is the USMCA trade agreement. A new Purdue University study suggests that the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is helping keep food prices lower for American consumers while supporting export opportunities for U.S. agriculture. The research estimates North American trade agreements save the average U.S. household about $700 annually on food purchases, while also helping strengthen agriculture supply chains and market access. The findings come as the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement approaches its scheduled review in July, only a few weeks away. Lawmakers and agricultural leaders met before the House Agriculture Committee met earlier this week on Wednesday to discuss the future of the trade pact, noting that Canada and Mexico purchase more than $60 billion in U.S. agricultural commodities annually and account for roughly 1/3 of all U.S. exports. So certainly important here to agriculture. Industry groups emphasize the importance of maintaining stable trade relationships as policymakers prepare for the upcoming review.
Despite ongoing tensions in the Middle East, oil prices have eased somewhat from the highs seen earlier this spring. Analysts say alternative export routes are helping keep crude supplies moving, while reduced oil demand from China has also helped limit upward pressure on prices in recent months. However, energy analysts are raising concerns about the continued decline of the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Reserve inventories are falling by roughly 8 to 10 million barrels per week, leaving the country with less emergency supply if future disruptions occur. The issue remains one to watch as geopolitical uncertainties continue to influence global energy markets.
Looking at ethanol now, exports pulled back in April after 6 straight months above 200 million gallons, according to new trade data released earlier this week. Total exports reached about 171.6 million gallons during the month, with Canada remaining the top buyer despite lower purchases compared to March. While exports to the European Union declined, shipments to South Korea surged to their highest level in 4 years. Despite this monthly slowdown, ethanol exports remain well ahead of last year's pace, totaling more than 811 million gallons through the first 4 months of 2026. Exports of dry distillers grains, or DDGs, also stayed strong, with shipments up 12% from a year ago. The continued demand for both ethanol and DDGs provide additional support for corn utilization in export markets. Certainly something that growers want to know more about is those market opportunities.
Yes, while global demand remains a key driver of corn markets, a new Purdue University analysis is comparing corn production costs in the United States and Brazil, two countries that account for nearly 60% of global corn exports. Researchers found that while total production costs remain higher on a typical Iowa farm, costs in Brazil have risen much faster in recent years, driven largely by fertilizer expenses and the country's reliance on imported nitrogen. Looking at the competitive landscape, the study found both U.S. and Brazilian farms benefited from strong corn prices in 2022, but profitability declined sharply in 2023 and 2024 as costs remained elevated. Researchers noted that both operations posted negative economic profits in the last 2 years of the study, underscoring the financial pressures facing corn producers as they compete in an increasingly global marketplace.
Continuing in the agronomy front, USDA is facing questions after eliminating its seed competition team last month, while simultaneously pledging to continue efforts aimed at improving competition within the seed industry. The team had been created to promote innovation and address concerns about market concentration, an issue that has received renewed attention as producers continue to navigate high input cost and tight margins. Certainly some chatter here on Twitter about that. Despite the change, USDA officials say they remain committed to pursuing reforms that support market access and encourage competition among seed providers. The issue comes as many farmers continue to express concerns about consolidation across the agricultural supply chain and its potential impact on input availability, pricing, and long-term profitability.
Continuing on with some more trade news, the USDA is accepting applications for its fiscal year 2027 agricultural trade promotion programs, which help producers and commodity groups expand export opportunities and build demand for U.S. products overseas. Applications for both the Market Access Program and the Foreign Market Development Program will be accepted through August 14th. The program operates as a public-private partnership that supports international marketing efforts and helps address trade barriers in foreign markets. USDA says the initiatives have generated significant returns for agriculture, estimating that every taxpayer dollar invested since 1977 has produced roughly $24.50 in export value. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said the program was intended to help the U.S. producers and remains competitive and reaches new customers around the world.
In some continued policy news here on the podcast, Josie, USDA Deputy Secretary Stephen Vaden says the agency remains on track to complete most of its planned reorganization by the end of 2026. Can't believe we're already almost in the middle of 2026. Speaking this week, Vaden said employees will be relocated from Washington, D.C. to regional hubs across the country, including Kansas City, Indianapolis, Raleigh, Fort Collins, and Salt Lake City. He emphasized that no reductions in force are planned and said local USDA service centers should not see changes as a result of this restructuring. The reorganization is one of the largest in USDA history and is intended to move more agency operations closer to agricultural regions. While some stakeholders have raised concerns about the potential loss of institutional knowledge as employees choose not to relocate, USDA officials say transition plans are in place to train new staff and to maintain continuity as the changes move forward.
Looking at some equipment manufacturing news, equipment manufacturers are continuing to invest in technologies designed to improve efficiency in the field. Shared this week, John Deere has announced updates to its 6R and 6M tractor lineups for model year 2027, with changes focused on operator comfort, transmission performance, and precision technology integration. Deere says the updates are intended to help operators handle a wide range of field and livestock tasks while improving efficiency and ease of operation. The updates reflected the continued push towards smarter, more connected equipment. New features include built-in connectivity, over-the-air software updates, and precision ag technology, alongside powertrain improvements aimed at boosting efficiency and performance. Deere says the tractors will continue to be available in multiple configurations to fit a variety of operational needs.
Well, this week's interview is a bit different, taking a closer look at farmer well-being with representatives from the National Pork Board and how they sit on the board, discussing the importance of safety and mental health and creating a culture that supports both. From managing physical risk on the farm to recognizing when it's time to ask for help, this conversation that I had with some folks offers some perspectives for producers and their families. Let's get into that conversation right now. Well, today we're talking all about mental and physical health with Darrell and Heather, both in the pork industry. So why don't we first get started to hearing your backgrounds and connection to the pork industry?
Sure, Darrell, I can start. So my name is Dr. Heather Fowler. I'm a public health veterinarian by training. I've worked with the National Pork Board as a director, producer, and public health for about 9 years now. I am a public health veterinarian and a One Health champion. So that means I constantly think about people, pigs, and planet. And really happy to say, having found a home at the National Pork Board, knowing that that really is our foundation, right? As we think about the We Care ethical principles, we're really working as an industry to do what's right for people, pigs, and planet.
Public health veterinarian, let's take a step there. How did you even know that was a career, and how do you kind of balance both the animal side and people side of things?
Yeah, I love working in the public health space in general. And during veterinary school, initially, I thought I would work as a small animal practitioner, working with cats and dogs. And it was through some of the experience in veterinary school, meeting with other public health veterinarians that work at health departments, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, that I even found out that this was a career, right? I enjoy science and research and epidemiology. And because of that interest, I can very readily balance human health and animal health. And again, given the focus on people, pigs, and planet within the swine industry, it makes it so easy. People are open and willing to partner. For instance, meeting Darrell in the safety space, right? We're thinking about production, but also safety. So we can balance the welfare of the animals and the well-being of the workers in farms.
Darrell, why don't you introduce yourself here on Ag News Daily?
Hello, Michelle. I've come from a farming background. Both my grandparents were farmers, and when I had the opportunity to go down and help on the farm, which I thought at the time was just play on the farm, but it was actually work, just enjoyed the animals and stuff. And then with the Maschhoffs, I began working with them, and at that time I was in the barn. And to be honest, at that time we really weren't aware of the hazards that we were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It was, here's the job, we need to get it done. And I think that's what a lot of farmers have today. You know, it's our job in front of us. Let's go do it. And then I left the pork industry for a little while, and then I've come back, and I've been back with the Maschhoffs for 16 years. I tell people I understand what I shouldn't have been doing when I was doing it, some of the hazards that I put myself into. But I think that the biggest thing is we just weren't aware of what the hazards were. And once you become aware of it, you're like, wow, now I need to change my behaviors. And that's the tough part about farming, is just changing our behaviors. A lot of times we put ourselves at risk, and, you know, we just don't either A, or don't realize, or B, we just got such a driven passion and motivation to get the job done that, you know, sometimes that puts ourselves at risk. So, I don't think the ag industry needs to be unsafe. I don't have to be unsafe. We just need to be aware of the hazards and how we need to keep ourselves safe.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, well, you appreciate both of your time here. Heather, you think of like safety in 4 different areas. Tell us a little more about those 4 different areas.
Well, very broadly, when I think about public health and worker safety, I think about physical safety. We think about some of the products we use, chemical safety, think about our surrounding environment, and then also like the person themselves, right? The operator. So thinking very broadly about worker safety in those ways.
Now, I think sometimes we look at safety as that, we want to be going fast or it's just on that sideline. Why should it be thought about as a priority for no matter how you're farming or where you're farming? Heather, why don't we start? Oh, Darrell, why don't we start with you?
Okay, no, it's funny you say that safety as a priority because we're kind of in a mind shift within our team here is that safety is really a value in that your values don't change. Safety is a part of everything we do. Whereas if you kind of talk safety as a priority, our priorities change. A water line breaks, a feed line breaks. My priority just changed to go fixing whatever that is in that situation. But, if safety is a value, that means, no matter what we're fixing, we have to think of safety first. And we think of, hey, what do I have to do to make sure I don't get hurt while I'm doing this task? And so I think that's really important. So interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah, I appreciate it and wholeheartedly agree. And then even to kind of build upon that, right? I think of like the person themselves, right? I joke that hey, this is this body we were given. We need to take care of it. Sure, we might be able to break something and it'll heal, but it doesn't usually heal exactly the way it was before. Like you might lose some functionality in those things. So we want to make sure that we're taking every step possible to protect ourselves physically as well as mentally and those around us, right? Because sometimes it may not me conducting a job in a way that's unsafe may not lead to me being injured. It may lead to someone else around me. So thinking about those things. So thinking very holistically about others, but also about ourselves and protecting ourselves.
Now, Darrell, you mentioned something that really caught my guard was the safety as a value here at the Maschhoffs. Tell us a little bit how you build that culture in a sense where it can be really captured by the employees.
Well, I think first off is thinking about safety as not being a hindrance to what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do. For instance, you're trying to fix a feed motor, having to lock it out. People think, oh, that's going to cost me time. I need to hurry up and get this fixed. But think of it, as Heather mentioned, holistically, that, hey, it's keeping me safe, that I don't have that inadvertent startup of that equipment while I'm trying to work on it because somebody on the other end is thinking, oh, this feed system's down. Oh, I need to just flip the switch and turn it on while I'm working on it, and leads to an injury. So it's not, safety is not a hindrance is a big thing, that changing that mindset. And then it's about, hey, I came to work in good working condition. I don't want to go home that way to my family the same way. And how do we, to do that, we have to think safety and follow those standards that we put in place and hold ourselves accountable to that. So it's more about thinking of it as, how do I keep myself safe that I go home the same way?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at moving animals, as I was looking into more of this interview and as we think about some of the different concepts of being safe, that's one thing that you want to touch on here, Darrell. So tell us a little bit about how we can be safe when we're moving animals.
Right. Well, I think first and foremost, it's always important to know your abilities, know what capabilities you have, or, if you're safe with moving animals, you feel comfortable moving those animals, in our sense, moving hogs. And, if I'm new to the game of moving animals, I probably don't want to be left alone at moving them because I just don't know all the ins and outs. These animals, they can change their demeanor, their behavior. They can shift and move very, very quickly when you least expect it. So really being understandable of that. I think it's also important to understand that, whatever animal that you're moving, whether it's market hogs, gilts, sows, boars, they all are a little bit different. They all have different nuances to them. And so you really have to understand what you're moving, being really comfortable with the animal that you're moving with. And then on top of that, making sure you got a sort board. That sort board is kind of your mechanism to, kind of put a barrier between you and the animal. So that animal does spin around. You can kind of put your sort board and it's in place of between you and them, you and the animal, so that it doesn't hit you directly, maybe a glancing blow. And the other part of it is around just let it go. if that animal comes back at you, spins around, a lot of times that animal is going to win. There's so much power there that, I know our reaction wants us to hurry up and try to stop that animal. I don't want to go after it, but if the doors are closed, gates are closed, whatever it may be, they're not going anywhere. I know it's aggravating and frustrating to have to circle back, but if you keep yourself safe and you just go back and be calm, move that animal. That's the other thing I would touch on, is just being calm. Those animals can read your behavior, and when you're stressed out, they can sense you're stressed. They're going to be stressed, and trying to stop an animal, making you and the animal both stressed, is not going to be a good situation. So that's my best advice I can provide on animal movements.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback on that, pun intended. That's a great example of the connections, right? We're in this shared environment. We have to consider animal behavior when moving and handling, but also worker safety. So it takes into consideration all of those aspects. So again, as a One Health champion, this is where I thrive, right? Because we are looking at all of these issues simultaneously. So thank you for outlining that, Darrell.
And Heather, would you say some of these are basic concepts, and it's the importance of repeated information that's key to managing employees?
Yeah, and I would encourage Darrell to chime in too, right? Because he's got the on the farm implementation. He can tell you how often you have to reinforce. But I think it's really kind of walking the walk, right? Walking the talk, however that phrase goes. I'm sorry. And that means, from seeing from leadership that they value and view regard safety very highly, and they encourage people to take your time, right? Darrell mentioned, hey, you might need to step away and then come back, but we're trying to get the work done. So having leadership that says, yeah, that's what we want you to do, right? Because we want you to come back to work tomorrow and continue to work with these animals. We don't want these animals injured while you're moving them. So it's, again, having this culture in place and reinforcing it through behavior and support.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think a couple of key things there is just, it's okay to ask for help. I know a lot of people are very hesitant to ask for help, but part of my comment earlier about just knowing your abilities, if you're moving some animals that you're just not comfortable with, or you're into a situation that things are just not going right, asking for help is key. And then if that animal becomes stressed, we've had several situations where the employees just understand it's not a good situation, and they'll set up, divider panels or whatever, and kind of keep the animal contained a little bit, and then just walk away and come back later. And sometimes the animal just moves itself and goes to where it belongs, and it's a great situation. But sometimes you come back and it's less stressful. The animal gets up and just moves to where it needs to move, and everything's good. So, that's a really key. It's just knowing abilities and know when to ask for help and when to step away and say, I need some time.
So we talked about the moving animals part, but another physical part is heat stress. I know this weekend it got to be a little warm and continuing here into summer. So what tips do you have, Darrell, about heat stress when we think about our producers?
Yeah, I think heat stress is kind of exactly what you said. With these roller coaster temperatures, it can be you're cool, nice and beautiful one day, and one day hot. So it's really trying to acclimate yourself to those warm temperatures and understand, hey, it's going to be warm today. I better make sure I carry enough water with me. And then back to what I mentioned earlier too about, I think we understand heat stress, but then our passion and our desire to get the job done. Oh, just one more task. Oh, one more task. And next thing you know, one more task continues to build and build and build. Next thing you know, I haven't had a drink for an hour or 2 hours. And, our passion and our desire to get the job done kind of gets in our way and can be a situation to our health. So, I think the other thing around understanding when you need water is, when you quit sweating. We're taught as little kids, if your urine's dark, you're not drinking enough. So it works for adults too. So, I think it's important. We can't forget that, and just understanding ourselves. And I think it's also key that we keep a monitor on each other. Sometimes, working as a team, and you notice somebody, maybe they're not been drinking much, or maybe they ran out of water, and just reminding them, hey, you may need to get to a cool area and take a break, take a rest, get some fluid. Sometimes it's just, hey, the team says, you know what, we need to just take a break right now, and to make it so it's comfortable. Some people don't want to step away because they don't want to look like that person that, is weak and this, that, and the other. Well, I always tell my team the strongest person is the one that recognizes themselves in a bad situation or unhealthy situation, they're willing to stand up and say, hey, I need help. I need to step away and get some drink, whatever that may be.
Well, we chatted a lot about the physical side, but there's a lot of resources and things to know on the mental health side and some resources that you suggest, Heather. So share some of those resources that you'd point producers to.
Sure. So at the National Pork Board, we work to collect some existing resources out there from partners in the ag space. AgriSafe, American Farm Bureau Federation, all have all sorts of resources targeting farmers and their families. And we've placed them on our website. So we encourage producers to go to porkcheckoff.org and navigate that site to receive and view those resources. I do want to point out, though, the National Pork Board is providing these resources from an educational, informational perspective. We encourage any producers that utilize the website for those resources to work with a medical professional if they're needing support for their own mental health needs, or with the organizers, creators of that content. We are not social workers or therapists ourselves, but we see the value in providing those resources, right? We know producers come to our website for all sorts of information. Here's another piece that they can use without having to dig through the resources elsewhere.
Well, we appreciate both of your time here today. Anything else that we missed that you'd like to chat on?
Well, as we talked about safety and mental health, physical safety, mental health and safety, just want to drive home that we also talked about animal movements, right? So want to drive home that the TQA, newest version of TQA is live, and want folks to continue to utilize that resource as it relates to transporting and handling hogs in a safe manner that prioritizes welfare.
Yeah, thank you both for your time here today.
Great to hear. We're going to shift to fertilizer prices. Fertilizer prices have fallen sharply in recent weeks as concerns over prolonged supply chain disruptions linked to Middle East tensions have eased, offering potential relief for crop producers heading into the next growing season. Bloomberg reports urea prices in New Orleans dropped to $453.50 per short ton last week, down 36% from mid-April and the lowest level since early February, following earlier fears that conflicts involving Iran could disrupt shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, an important global export route. The decline in input costs has also weighed on grain markets, with corn and wheat prices moving lower as cost pressures ease, though analysts caution fertilizer markets remain sensitive to geopolitical risks and energy price swings. With that being said, Michelle, what's happening in the markets this week?
Well, certainly we keep talking about the war that's happening between the tensions between U.S. and Iran. So that's just continuing what traders are seeing. Perhaps maybe there is some talks to end the conflict, easing some of those immediate escalation fears. We'll continue to watch that. But in some fresh news this week, the USDA's June WASDE report shows a mostly neutral report, with corn and soybeans largely unchanged, and wheat showing the biggest shift in lower U.S. production and stocks. On the corn side, it's steady here for 2026 through 2027, with ending stocks slightly higher and prices holding at that $4.40 per bushel. Soybeans remain unchanged overall, with stronger crush demand offsetting by weaker exports, keeping balance sheets steady and prices near that $11.40 per bushel. Wheat sees the most pressure, though, here, with lower production, reduced yields and tighter ending stocks, along with a lower price forecast. Here in the global markets, they show that bigger corn supplies from Brazil, Argentina, and India. And analysts say attention now shifts to the June 30th acreage and grain stocks report. So that's what we saw here on the WASDE report. On the livestock side of things, it's mixed as New World screwworm concerns persist, with quarantine cases raising logistics issues and risk of further spread, while hogs this week saw a small rebound but remained oversold this week. So certainly some news on the market front. We've reported on what's the New World screwworm, seen some of what's the checkoff and ag groups are saying about that. So we'll continue to watch that here on Ag News Daily.
We hope that you stay connected and up to date. Follow along on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok at Ag News Daily, and we'll see you more there.
Yeah, well, we enjoyed co-hosting with you all here this week and filling in for Delaney Howell and Tanner Winterhoff. But Josie, what do you say? Should we let the listeners go?
Let's let them go.